Welcome to Kronos Talks, a place for some candid thoughts on what might need to change to get the worlds of sustainable finance and corporate sustainability to generate positive impacts. Hello, I'm Elliot Frankal, Senior Manager Communications, and I'm with the two big cheeses here at Kronos, MD Nicky Amos. Hi, Nicky.
Hi, Elliot.
And CEO Rory Sullivan. Hi, Rory.
Hey, Elliot.
Hi, Rory. And you're fresh from your Books of the Year reporting on LinkedIn. Is that right? Have you finished?
No, we're actually in the middle of it, Elliot. So we have done, day one was the summary. Day two was a new feature statistical analysis, given that we're speaking to the RI community. Day three was non-fiction books of the year. Day four was fiction books of the year. And day five is going to be the books to avoid, the worst books of the years I read.
And you can tell me the analytics, but I suspect you get more people commenting on your worst books of the year.
There is quite a hierarchy. I get most comments and likes, if you take that as a proxy for engagement, on the first post, because it's always the picture of the books. And then the second one, yes, is the worst books of the year. But I have had people disagree with me on books of the year. But I've taken that as a judgment on their literary taste rather than mine.
Good. And Nicky, you're fresh back from New York, is that right?
I am back from New York, yeah. Crazy place at this time of year. Glad to be back in the UK.
Crazy place. And as we're talking about 2025, it'll probably get crazier.
Might well do.
Let's see. So it's December and the end of the year. So we're going to use this podcast to reflect a little bit on 2024, but mainly to look ahead to what 2025 might have in store for the ESG and corporate sustainability community. And why don't we start with a few thoughts on 2024? Nicky, should we come to you?
So I think 2024 will be remembered in sustainability terms as a pivotal year. A year when companies, at least those based in or operating within the EU, will be required for the first time through regulatory mechanisms such as CSRD to professionalise their sustainability efforts and be held accountable. I've been involved in corporate sustainability for over 30 years, and it's really the first time that companies are going to be held to account. So against this need for more clarity and certainty, companies and their investors are having to operate in a climate of uncertainty. You know, we've seen the global economic slowdown, there are geopolitical risks and regulatory pressures, climate physical risks, biodiversity loss. So it's a crazy time to be looking for that certainty. And alongside all of those other changes, I think we're seeing a bit of an erosion of social cohesion and social capital as well. Lots of public anger, distrust, divisiveness, lack of empathy, etc., which is impacting political stability as well as individual well-being and economic productivity. So the stakes are quite high, I'd say.
Are you feeling that pressure on companies is a positive thing in terms of their sustainability performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think, for too long, we've been relying on voluntary mechanisms to get companies to be accountable. But the need for change and the need for transformation is more critical than ever.
Rory, how's 2024 for you?
My view is that 2024 was the disco year. So it was the clear it out, shake it out year, or at least the beginning of that. I think for the last decade, we've had lots of companies and investment institutions piling into sustainability and responsibility, talking the talk, making big promises. I think 2024, for all the factors Nicky raised, has seen quite a shakeout. I think we've started seeing those where those commitments are deeply rooted in the organization and in its purpose and mission, and those where it was simply just another marketing fad. And I think we're seeing the same amongst the leadership of organizations. Those who properly understand sustainability, understand its importance to their organization and to the future of society, I think have stood up. Those who haven't have drifted back. And I think the uncertainties and the challenges we face are difficult. But I think it's much easier when you're not dealing with sanctimony, hypocrisy, and pretentiousness in the middle of it. So I would say the disco is only just getting started. And I think 2025, for both positive and negative reasons, is going to be an exciting and challenging, but actually I think could be quite a rewarding year for those of us who care about sustainability.
You were a PR in person in Canada, and I remember a great quote from Mark Kearney in that conference where he said something like, you're the first generation of investors to understand climate risk and the last to be able to do anything about it.
My sense from from PRI in person, and there were lots of, like, many of our friends, great people who are doing really good work. I think what we're seeing alongside these changes is we're also seeing kind of a ramping up of the level of professionalism and the type of knowledge that's required of people who do our work. I think there's a step up or get out of the kitchen challenge for many people in the industry. Those who can skill up and are able to deal with it, I think, are going to be hugely impactful. But the ways we've done things in the past need to be rethought, and we need to move on.
There are lots of really good professionals in the corporate sustainability arena, but there are also lots of generalists. And I think the complexity of the sustainability challenges that corporates are having to face and what investors will be expecting of them will require an upskilling in some of those technical competencies, either within organizations or using outsourced arrangements. I think for too long, companies have been able to get by ensuring that there are intelligent individuals, but generalists in the sustainability field. I think going forward, there's going to be a much greater requirement on technical expertise.
Let's look ahead to 2025. What is it you're seeing on the landscape in the responsible investment and corporate sustainability worlds? Do you think our sector should be aware of or should be looking out for in 2025?
Okay, well, as IPCC said, 2025 is really the year that global emissions must peak if we're going to stay on track to 1.5 degrees C. Companies that are not already committing to transition planning need to be seriously thinking about it. They need to be looking at it in terms of, not a business as usual, but what are they prepared to do differently in order to keep within the thresholds needed. Obviously, COP30 in Brazil next year will keep climate very much on the agenda. And of course, we'll start to see the regulations playing through, the sustainability regulations like CSRD, with companies needing to report their disclosures on sustainability performance, double materiality assessments. We've got the EUDR, with its extended timeline coming into play in 2025. And then looking very specifically at one area that we're involved in at Kronos, which is animal welfare. 2025 is the first milestone set by many companies for achieving one of their very first animal welfare improvement commitments, which is around cage-free egg sourcing. So a lot of companies in the next year will be doing a lot of work to understand if they can or cannot meet that commitment and what they need to do if they feel that there are structural or other barriers in place that are going to prevent them from meeting those obligations.
I think there are actually two different things that I think we have to deal with in 2025. So one is, of course, the inevitable ESG backlash and the implications of a Trump White House. There would be pressure on regulators in order to wind back some of the work they've done. So I think one of our challenges as a community of professionals is to step up and to challenge those changes and to be prepared to say, no, this is actually what we need. But I think with that, I think for a long time, we've relied often on quite poorly constructed arguments about what's the right thing to do and why we're doing it. So I think investors need to get much sharper on fiduciary duty. I think companies and the advocates for sustainability within companies need to get much stronger on articulating the business case for sustainability. Now, that's not to say that we move into a world where unless there's a business case or investment case, it doesn't happen. It's not that point, but it is about we need to be much clearer about the rationale for what we're doing and why those interventions are in the short-term and long-term interests of the organizations we're working with. So I would say for me, 2025, it's going to be tough. There are going to be some backtracking, and part of our job is to try and hold the ground a little bit. Part of it's maybe we've got to deal with some of that. But I think the other part is to get much stronger about articulating why we're doing it, why it's in the short and long-term interests of organizations, and to stop being lazy in our rhetoric.
I think you're absolutely right, Rory. I think what we have seen is that companies in previous years have sleepwalked their way into sustainability commitments and without really thinking about the business rationale, without thinking about the impact on business or stakeholders across their value chain. And I think they've been driven by ambition. So the intention was correct, but they really didn't put the work into really thinking about the implications. So we're going to see missed targets in a number of sustainability disciplines. I think the warning should be heeded for companies that are now thinking about transition planning. because it has to go beyond ambition. They really do have to think seriously about what it is that they can feasibly do within their operations and within their supply chains to really bring about the change that's needed.
Would you say you're optimistic about 2025 or pessimistic? Neither of you mentioned Mr. Trump. I would say there's a note of pessimism around our community, the sustainability community in general. What's your sense then? Are you reasons to be optimistic?
Okay,
or
let me
pessimistic?
jump in on this one, Elliot, because I'm highly optimistic because I have maxed out on fake tan products and hair care products and ozone depleting substances. So I have an investment portfolio that I think is designed to succeed no matter what happens in 2025. But actually, there's another reason for being optimistic as well. So I'm going to go back to, I think it was about 2010 or 2011. I did some work for the Institutional Investors Group on climate change, and it was a report called Investment Grade Climate Change Policy. So we're going back, 12 or 14 years. At that point, there were two big problems to the deployment of renewable energy technologies, two big barriers. One was technology uncertainty, and the second was policy uncertainty. Many of the technologies at that time were relatively unproven. Offshore wind, even onshore wind, we didn't have the certain number of years of experience in running those facilities. Solar was kind of at scale, was still questionable about how you'd fit into a grid and deal with intermittency and all the rest of it. So we had a sort of a set of questions around the technologies and good work. And then we also had the question around policy and would the policy frames, which at that point were about subsidy, about would governments follow through on their commitments. Fast forward 12 to 15 years, we now have a set of technologies which are cost competitive without need for policy support. So should we be optimistic? I would look at energy and I would go, we know how to do this. We have had a success. And the progressive increase in the amount of energy coming from renewable sources, I think will continue just because the economics now work. And I would probably have a similar view on electric vehicles. We've got challenges and, the charging infrastructure isn't quite there yet. But actually, the costs are coming down, infrastructure is being built, the reliability is being proven, the market for secondhand cars is working. So I think on some of the big contributors to climate change, we either have the solutions or we are on track to solutions being effected. In that context, what a Trump White House does, for example, actually some of the levers he might have tried to pull won't work because who in his or her right mind would build new coal in North America at the moment? So what's going to overcome the rationality of economics? And it's not clear that chaotic 4 years of White House governance is going to do that. So I'm actually optimistic on a big macro picture, but I think we have both in terms of the issues we care about, but also personally, some very demanding years ahead of us. We're not going into comfort easy street where we're in fashion. We're going into years where we have to show what we stand for and stick with it through what I think will be quite a difficult era. But ultimately, I'm optimistic. We can't be pessimistic or we'll just give up and, wither away.
I agree. Time isn't to be defeatist. I think the challenges ahead are formidable. I mean, to deliver any transformational change in social and environmental issues is difficult, but we have to believe they're not unsurmountable. And I think if we can successfully address these headwinds, we need a combination of public policy, we need business leadership, we need technological information, as Rory said, we need financial investment, and we need public engagement. So, I am optimistic. I have to believe that we can make a difference and that companies can deliver the change needed along with the capital markets. And the long-term benefits will certainly pay off in terms of climate resilience, in terms of economic growth, and in terms of a more sustainable planet. These far outweigh the risks of inaction.
I think really interesting thing about what we're going to have to go through over the next few years, Trump and his acolytes and his counterparts over here don't go after things that are not important to them. They don't go after things that they aren't worried about or don't see as becoming a new phase. So I often think when people are challenging what you do, you've got to face up to it and get better at what you do. But it's also they wouldn't bother if it didn't matter. Sustainability matters. And it really matters when people start getting really angry and pushing back against it.
In the corporate world, do you think, Nicky, the culture of a Trump presidency, this kind of anti-woke culture that he likes to rally against, do you think that will affect companies? Do you think they'll push back on their sustainability and kind of keep it quiet and just get it done? Do you think they'll be cowed by it, or do you think we'll see them continuing to be political with a little p, talking about their green credentials, their diversity credentials, I think they'll be a bit cowed by it.
I think if this were happening 20 years ago, they might well be cowed by it. But there's too much momentum behind the sustainability movement now. I think companies have been investing in corporate sustainable practice for decades now, and they have a clear sense of both the business risks and the benefits associated with their sustainability policies. So it's highly unlikely that they're going to be influenced by whoever's in power for the next 4 years.
Having said that, Nicky, so I'm going to talk, if I may, about myself and some work I did with Andy Goulson at the University of Leeds. So the project we did was we looked at how the retail sector globally had evolved its approach to sustainability over about 20 years. So we went through like all sustainability reports, all the performance data, and we said, what happened? What happens in times like this is inertia is your friend. It takes probably 2 electoral cycles for companies to start systematically pulling back from their commitments. So you can get through any 4 years, and I think when you go to 8 years, it gets more difficult. And I think we've also seen this in some of the benchmarks we've run, where we've had a quieter year. You do get some companies who go, oh, nobody's coming anymore, we'll step away, and then others can sort of commit and stick to stuff for a longer period of time. So I think you're right, Nicky, but I think it's not just the positive ambition, but there's also they've institutionalized certain values deep in the organization. And even if the organization wants to pivot or change to being less concerned about these issues, it takes a long time for that to play through. So I do think both companies and the finance sector, there is a lot of institutionalization, which will buy us time on some of these agendas. But I think we can't assume that they are going to be strong enough to stick with that if, let's say, the Trump presidency is followed by another Trump acolyte in the White House, or if some of the political winds in Europe change. So I think that's why, going back to the point I made previously about the importance of professionalizing, part of it is institutionalizing it. The more this is hardwired into a normal business practice, the more likely it is that the effect we describe will occur. But I don't think we can assume or rely on companies or investors as en masse, let's say, or in the main, sticking with these agendas in the face of very hostile political conditions. We have to work with them to say, okay, find a business case for doing, find a way you can navigate this. Maybe you've got to be quiet for a while on some issues, but I think there's the skills we now need are, we're at war. The skills you need in wartime are different to skills you need in peacetime. That's the challenge for us, as not just as us as consultants, but our friends and peers in industry and companies. The world is different. You've got to change what you do to ensure the values and the issues we care about continue to be treated with the importance they need, and that we continue to make progress.
Aside from the political environment, I think companies need to be responsive to a very challenging and rapidly changing global landscape, whether that's climate physical risks or biodiversity loss. These are the reality of what companies are going to have to deal with in the coming years. So aside from any political will, the reality of business disruption and economic impact is a very real threat to companies.
And speaking of disruption, I think we're legally bound to mention AI in any prediction of 2025. I just wonder, maybe as a final point, what do you feel the impact of technology and AI is going to play out in the year ahead, or what do you think the sustainability community need to be thinking about?
I see there being 2 things. One is, I think AI is now going to alter the structure of many professions. So ChatGPT can program. ChatGPT can replace a lot of stuff that used to be done by legal clerks and advisors. So I think AI is going to threaten the professions that have probably seen themselves as relatively immune to these kind of social or transition changes. I think the question for us is that how do we harness AI to make what we do better? So does AI allow us to deliver our work more efficiently? Does it give us insights that we wouldn't have got otherwise? How do we harness it to do our work better, or more efficiently, or more effectively? Will it change things? Yes. Will it harm us? Only if we're not thoughtful about how we use it. And I think the successful businesses of the future in the knowledge industry, which is effectively what we're in, will be those who can successfully marry technology with human insight and value. But I think those who are touting AI as we're now an AI business, you go, yeah, see you later, because you won't survive for very long. But similarly, I think those who've relied on being sort of the human businesses, will probably also start to struggle in that new world. So I think the successful businesses of the future will be those who harness AI, complement it with human insight, and deliver insights or services or products that people want. So it's not good, it's not bad, it's just different. And I guess we, as a business, Nicky has talked a lot about the speed of change in the world. We need to evolve and adapt and remain relevant to the world we live in, not the world we'd like to be in.
AI will bring many efficiencies and some advancements, but it's very much seen as a shiny new toy in the toy shop. And it's not a magic wand. It's not going to be the answer to everything. AI does have a purpose. It can bring benefit, but it will not completely replace and should not completely replace the human intelligence. So AI plus HI.
I think we've covered most of the last year and the year ahead. Any other thoughts you want to kind of close out on or reflect on?
I do. So I'm a mid-career professional. So I reckon I have another 30 years doing this. And I think, some of your questions early on, Frey, were, are we optimistic? Are we pessimistic? I don't think either is a particularly good mindset to be bringing into the work we do. I think we will have some highs, some things go well, some things go bad. Somebody else asked me this question about, am I an optimist or pessimist a few weeks? And I said, neither. I said, but whatever I am, I'm not giving up. And I think 2025 and beyond are years where those of us who work in this industry need to be prepared to work hard, but we can't give up. This is not a time for abandoning ourselves to despair. If you care about sustainability, in the next 5 to 10 years is when you earn your money. And at the end of that, when you get to the end of your career, these are the years that you should be judging yourself on. Was I there when it really mattered?
And same for me, really. There is, this is not the time for inertia. It's not even the time for business as usual. I think companies really need to face up to the reality that we are, and they will be operating in a very difficult and challenging and changing landscape. And any business that does not prioritize sustainability, resilience, and responsible growth will find themselves, in trouble further down the line. 2025
is the year to act, and it's going to be a year of hard graft. I'm going to go back to the disco year. Right, 2024. let's make it count while we've still got it. So look,
I'm trying to work out if that is Florence and the Machine or Taylor Swift or someone else, Rory.
It's the Killers, isn't it?
And it's been growing up just like you imagined when you were young.
If you can't hold on, hold on. That's one of my favourite Killers lines.
I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier, which I think is probably the maddest line I've ever seen written down. But when you've got 20,000 people singing I've got soul, but I'm not a soldier at the O2 after England qualifying for the European Championship final, there's a sort of a collective catharsis there that even I, as a Irish football supporter, felt compelled to join into. So I think there is also something about the power and the need for us to work together and actually to come together in person and spend time together and to make sure we charge our energy. And I say, even if it's about football, sport and books, those things may well be as sustaining as anything else we do this year or next year.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I wish you all a happy holidays and see you in 2025.
Thank you, Elliot.
Thanks, Elliot.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to hear more from the Kronos team, please do follow our feed on LinkedIn, Kronos Sustainability, and listen to more episodes of Kronos Talks on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And wishing everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, or if that's already passed, a Happy New Year. We'll see you in 2025.